Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. Officials warn thousands of Illinois residents could lose Medicaid coverage under President Trump's new law. Meanwhile, Mayor Johnson slams the law's tax breaks for wealthy Americans and deep spending cuts to the social safety net. How the measure could impact Chicago's financial outlook. And from outdated technology to a shortage of workers, concerns over the country's air traffic control system. First off tonight, millions of Americans could lose their health insurance under President Trump's new tax and spending cuts law that includes more than 300,000 Illinois residents on Medicaid. However, Republican lawmakers say the changes are aimed at eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse in the system. Here to talk more about the local impact are Jeremy Rosen, Director of Economic Justice at the Shriver Center on Poverty Law, and on Zoom, Ted Dabrowski, president of WirePoints. That's an independent nonprofit research and commentary organization focusing on Illinois' economy and government. Gentlemen, thanks to you both for joining us. Jeremy Rosen, what is the expected domino effect now that the legislation has passed and been signed?
Thank you for that question. Thanks for having me. So what we're looking at in Illinois is the possibility of over 500,000 people losing their health care. And that's about 300,000 from Medicaid and about 200,000 more people who could lose Affordable Care Act subsidies that help make their health care affordable. And we think many of those folks without subsidies will not be able to continue purchasing health care.
What's the ripple effect from that, from not having health care, not being able to buy it?
Ripple effect is extremely serious, and it's extremely serious for people and really for all of our communities. So for people, of course, they just won't be able to go to the doctor and get the care that they need. When I get sick, I know that I have insurance. I know I can call my doctor, I can go to the doctor. For people not to have that, what happens is they wait until they get very, very sick. They go to emergency rooms. That's not good for their health. It's also not good for the healthcare system. Emergency room care is extremely expensive, much more expensive than preventative care that folks would get from their own doctors. And it's also bad for the community. I mean, sounds like the mayor talked about this today, right? There's an impact on our safety net hospitals in the city of Chicago, where most of their patients are getting their care paid for by Medicaid. If those patients no longer have Medicaid, hospitals have to provide free and charitable care. They'll probably do that, but there's a risk that many of them will have to go out of business. They simply can't afford to provide too much of that care.
Ted, Republicans claim that these cuts are right-sizing the safety net programs for the population that they were intended to serve. Tell us how these changes will do that.
Well, I think we need to understand that Medicaid was supposed to take care of the low-income parents, the disabled, the elderly. And it was supposed to be a real safety net for those people who were poor and in trouble and in need. And what's happened since then is that the numbers have ballooned, and we keep adding more and more people to Medicaid. And there's the massive expansion that added over 700,000, this is important, single, able-bodied, working-age people. So when you add 700,000 people who are not, not disabled, not sick, not elderly, not kids, and you put them on a system that's meant to take care of people in need, then you get a system that no longer works and it doesn't function. It's too big. And so, right now we've got a bunch of people who are healthy and able to work, and we're taking care of them and sucking away money from the very poor people we're supposed to be taking care of. And that's the problem. It's an upside down system. It used to be 1.4 million people in Illinois on Medicaid in 2000. Now it's it got up to 3.8, and now it's 3.4 million. So, when you have 25% of your population on something like this, something's not good in the economy, and we need to talk more about that because we don't have enough growth to create jobs to get people off of Medicaid.
Let's talk about that and how did we get here? Why are there so many people on Medicaid as it tripled, as you described, since 2000?
Well, this is one of the interesting facts. If you look at since Governor Pritzker took office, but if you go further back than Governor Pritzker, we lag the country in economic growth. And look, the most important thing to getting healthcare coverage and having private coverage and good coverage is a work and jobs. And we've had the fourth, since Governor Pritzker took over, we've had the fourth worst economy in the country. We've created almost no private sector employment. So guess what? When you don't create jobs and your economy doesn't grow, you have more people dependent on Medicaid. And that's a problem. And when we start putting people who are single, able-bodied, working-age people on Medicaid, then one, it creates more taxes, more tax hikes. And two, it sucks the money away from the very people, right? These, people who do deserve support, who are elderly or sick or disabled. We're sucking away the money from them.
So Ted, you're saying obviously there needs to be more job opportunity. It sounds like you're saying so that people don't need Medicaid. But is it premature to take them off of Medicaid before those job opportunities are presented?
Well, this is the problem. You have to understand that before COVID, we had about 2.8 million people on Medicaid, and we jumped up to 3.8. And maybe you could argue that during COVID, right, you had the government shutdown, people didn't have jobs, people were sick. All right, so we boom Medicaid and boom spending. But since then we're back to COVID's far behind us now, and you got very low unemployment in the country. We should be having these people try to get jobs, and this is what they're trying to do: work requirements for the people who are single, able-bodied. You think about the moral case. Instead of taking care of sick people, we're taking care of single, able-bodied people, and it's backwards. They should be contributing to the unhealthy.
Jeremy, how should Illinois respond to these cuts?
Absolutely. First of all, so Ted, I think, is setting up a false choice between taking care of people with disabilities, children, seniors on Medicaid, and taking care of single adults. We quite intentionally expanded Medicaid through the Affordable Care Act to take care of a lot of single adults, because we understood that at very, very low income levels and with jobs that weren't providing health care at all, or were providing, quite frankly, awful health insurance for people, we wanted those folks to get coverage. That was an intentional decision. That represents about 15 years of intentional health policy, starting with the Affordable Care Act and the Obama administration. So we did that intentionally, and we did it for good reason, because we understood that it's a good thing for this country when more people have health care. And when more people have health care, it's easier for them to get and find jobs. So Ted is a little bit backwards, I think, in thinking about this. Second of all, very important to know, the state can respond. It is true that we may not be able to literally make up coverage for every person who might lose it under some of these federal proposed cuts. That being said, there's a lot the state could do. We know, for example, with work requirements, we can either wait until the requirements come up and just let people fall off coverage if they don't turn in a piece of paper, if they fall through the cracks of bureaucratic red tape, or we can work to fix our government systems, make sure, let's say, that 2 weeks before somebody is about to lose coverage, somebody from the state gives them a call and says, hey, you know what, you're going to lose your coverage in 2 weeks unless you fill out this piece of paper. Can we help you fill it out? Can we see if you're eligible for an exemption to the work requirements? So there's a lot the state can do there. There's also a lot the state can do to raise revenue. So if there are people losing coverage, we know that the state can raise money through taxing the richest people in the state to actually help pay to make up for some of these service cuts. And it's important to remember why these cuts are being made. They're actually not because there was anything wrong with the program, as was asserted earlier. Cuts are being made because Congress and the President decided that billionaires needed huge tax cuts, and we needed to weaponize the ICE deportation machine. We had to pay for that somehow, and the decision was to pay for it by cutting Medicaid, by cutting food assistance, by cutting programs that the lowest income people depend on. So those are really immoral choices made in Washington, D.C.
Ted, I'm sure you want to respond to that. And to that point, there have also been reports that lower and middle income citizens are going to face higher costs as a result of this, widening the income gap. What will be next? What do you make of that?
Well, I think just to respond to Jeremy's points, and with all due respect, Jeremy and I see the world differently. Jeremy and people like Governor Pritzker and those in charge of the government, they wear it as a badge of honor that we have more and more people dependent on government, right? The more people are dependent on food stamps, the bigger the list is, the more people on Medicaid, they're happier. And I see the exact opposite. And he says, let's just raise revenues, right? Which means taxes. And everybody knows that we're spending way too much in Illinois. We have the highest property taxes, second highest gas taxes, highest cell phone taxes. People are being taxed out. So it's not that simple. And the right method and the other way to do it is have a booming economy where people aren't dependent on government medical insurance isn't the best one to be on. There's far better private sector insurance. And so really the solution is to get people off of Medicaid. Don't have them dependent on government, because if they become long-term dependent on government, they lose working skills, all those things that are so critical to being successful in life. So Jeremy and I have a totally different view. That's why he wants to see more people on it. I'd love to see people off of it.
Okay, that's where we'll have to leave it. Obviously, it remains to be seen, the long-term impact, but we look forward to speaking with you both about it again in the future as we watch this story continue. Jeremy Rosen and Ted Dabrowski, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Up next, Mayor Johnson joins the debate over tax breaks for the country's wealthiest. Heather Sharon with that story right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Mayor Brandon Johnson is the latest Democratic leader pushing back on cuts imposed by President Donald Trump's new tax and spending law. Johnson today condemned the law's large tax breaks for the wealthiest Americans and deep spending cuts to the nation's social safety net.
This is an abomination. This is sinful. It's unholy. This bill is a fundamental attack on our democracy and our way of life.
Heather Sharon joins us now with more. Heather, so we know Chicago's financial outlook, it has already been looking bleak with a projected $1.2 billion deficit for 2026 on the horizon. And Johnson is saying that this bill will make the city's finances worse. How so?
Well, the city's social safety net has really never recovered from the COVID pandemic. And while Mayor Johnson was elected on promises to restore that safety net, he says it will simply be impossible in the face of these cuts. That will make significant changes to how people get health care coverage if they're poor, food assistance if they need it, and it's just not clear sort of what the ultimate impact will be. The city is still finishing an analysis of it, but we know from Governor J.B. Pritzker's office that nearly 11% of everybody on Medicaid in Illinois will lose that coverage over the next decade. And in Chicago, 1 in 5 households don't have enough to eat on a daily basis, and 600,000 Chicagoans rely on supplemental assistance, nutritional SNAP
benefits, yes.
And that will be a very serious change in their lives.
Okay, so a pretty bleak picture, as we said. The mayor is also saying that this bill would increase crime and violence in Chicago. What's his argument there?
Well, he is very proud that homicides in Chicago are down nearly 30% as opposed to the same period last year, and shootings are down more than 40%. He credits that drop in part to the integration of violence prevention programs with the Chicago Police Department. The president has already moved to slash funding for those sort of organizations. The mayor said today if those organizations have to scale back operations or close entirely, it will have a profound impact on what the police department is asked to do on a daily basis, and it will make it harder to prevent retaliatory violence.
So the bill also includes $165 billion $165 billion that federal officials have said they will use to expand efforts to deport as many undocumented immigrants as possible, of course, to fulfill the president's promise to implement the largest mass deportation in U.S. history. What does that mean for Chicago?
Well, it's not clear. I asked the mayor today if the city was sort of preparing for militarized immigration enforcement actions like the ones we've seen this week in Los Angeles. He said the city is going to have to be innovative, but it's not clear that the city can really do anything in the wake of a Department of Homeland Security that has an extremely expanded capacity to detain those they consider to be undocumented immigrants. And it means that the impact on the police department, which could be called to sort of keep the peace in the wake of protests, it's unclear what it will mean for their operations as well.
All right, Heather Sharon, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. That's WTTW.com/news. And we're back with more right after this. The country's beleaguered air traffic control system is getting an update. Major crashes in Newark and Washington, D.C. this year placed a spotlight on the system's shortcomings. The Federal Aviation Administration is more than 3,000 controllers short, working with outdated technology, and is generally under-resourced. But the Trump administration's recently passed so-called Big Beautiful Bill pledges to fill those gaps, setting aside $12.5 billion to modernize the system. Joining us now with more via Zoom are Dennis Tager, an American Airlines pilot and spokesman for the Allied Pilots Association, and Rob Mark, retired pilot, former air traffic controller, and publisher of aviation blog Jetwine. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us. So,
thank you for having us.
First, I want to get your reaction to a little bit of air news of the day, or aviation news of the day, and the TSA saying we may not have to wear our shoes through security anymore after the last 20 years of doing that. Dennis, first, quick reaction to you.
Well, we know when that started. It was called the shoe bomber, and there was someone who was seriously equipped. While it may sound unusual, but had explosives in their shoes. And after that, we had these restrictions. So I trust that the TSA has now the equipment, so that type of threat is no longer, with us. So it's not to be messed around with. And while hearing you don't have to take your shoes off is welcome for the general screening. We're going to rely on TSA to have known what it's doing to reduce that measure of security.
Rob Mark, same question to you.
I think we cannot forget although this sounds a bit crazy at this point to have people take off their shoes, we can't forget that 25 years ago, we experienced 9/11, and the culture within the country of what was going to happen or what could potentially happen made people extremely upset. And so, again, I don't know that how it should have lasted as long as it did. But again, as I said, it was very different times when it was initiated.
That's right. Dennis, I just mentioned, of course, some of the FAA's challenges, shortcomings. How did we get here?
Well, it's decades in the making. It's just no pun on words, but it's plain poor planning. And it was handed off from one administration to the next. Rob was probably an air traffic controller, and they were using literally the same equipment. We saw Secretary Duffy in a press conference where the airline unions, pilots, air traffic controllers, the airlines, the CEOs, and the administration, new Secretary Duffy, laid out, here's the problem. Now, they focused on Newark because that's where the epicenter for this earthquake was. And they implored everyone. And laying out that equipment, I got to tell you, I knew of it. But when you see it, I mean, I thought it was an IT thrift store. And hearing that they were ordering replacement parts on eBay, it was not only embarrassing, but it was an absolute crush of the trust that I have as a pilot, that someone is watching the shop and ensuring that we have the best equipment out there to support what is now, we're in the tail end of the busiest 4th of July air travel season in 15 years, according to the FAA. So it was demoralizing to see, but it was uplifting to hear the words and the action points that were taken on. And now we have upfront funding, and that's important because for years it was just a little bit at a time. So
$12.5 billion, Rob, it sounds like a decent amount to start fixing some of these issues, but how much of the problem is about the funding versus what Dennis said was, plain poor planning, but also oversight?
Oh, I think we cannot eliminate anything here. It's funding. It's how the funding is generated. It is poor planning, poor management. That has been in place since back when the days when I worked as a controller. And it's also the process that the FAA has used to try to improve the system. It's a very antiquated system. It's very bureaucratic. And again, as you said, $12.5 billion is some serious money to most of us, but it is probably not enough to make this dream come true for Secretary Duffy. I think it's probably going to take more than double that amount.
So back in May, Secretary of Transportation, and I'm going to come to you, Dennis, but Sean Duffy, he announced that plan to build a brand new state-of-the-art air traffic control system that will be, quote, the envy of the world. So that plan includes replacing antiquated telecommunications, replacing 618 radars, addressing runway safety, and building 6 new air traffic control centers. Dennis, what is your reaction to this plan initially? Because the federal government says it's going to take about 2-3 years to do all of this.
It took decades in the making, and the airplane I fly doesn't care what your political preferences are. We just care about having the right equipment, the right people in place. That's a big shovel, $12.5 billion. We're going to need more, I'm sure, going forward. It's going to take time, but no better time now than now to take it on. And if you think it's costly to do this, you're not going to like the cost of not doing it.
Rob, you are a former air traffic controller. We mentioned that the industry is 3,000 people short. What was it like entering the field?
Well, I was around during the controller strike, and that was 1981. And we thought things were, as Dennis pointed out, kind of antiquated then. But I look at what controllers use today, and I'm just amazed that we are seeing much of the same equipment. Oh, yes, there are radars in places where there weren't any before. But again, to talk about using equipment that is so old that they can't even find parts for them, this is insane. And again, the money is an issue about how we're going to pay for new equipment. But let's not forget the management oversight that led to someone saying, well, that's the best we can do. We'll just have to live with it till some later date when somebody fixes it. And it's this constantly, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. We've been seeing that for 30 years. And I'm afraid that to the secretary's, and I want to applaud his energy at trying to fix this. But if he doesn't get what he says he needs to really get this thing going, I'm more concerned that we're going to get somewhere down the road and then say, oh, sorry, no more money. Can't fix it all. And we'll be back where we started from.
Dennis, how is your job as a pilot? How does it become more stressful or difficult at a time like this when the industry is experiencing a surge in travel?
Well, it's safe out there. Professional pilots and air traffic controllers don't deal in unsafe environments. When it's like that, we get out of it. And we have procedures for it. So, but the thing is, the margin of safety is under immense pressure. We have a lot of new people. They're experienced, but not as seasoned. Post-pandemic with all the retirements we had, an underinvestment in infrastructure, airlines trying to, in this current cycle where there's a little bit of a dip off in demand, believe it or not, they're trying to make sure that they're being as efficient and sometimes cost-cutting wherever possible. So you have all these things intersecting for the first time in my 40 years, all happening at the same time. And I want to point out, 2 years ago, almost to the day, the NTSB had a safety summit. I attended, air traffic controllers and pilots, and we were just imploring the world, and thank God the NTSB gave us a platform to say, hey, we don't like what we're seeing. And fate is screaming at us to do something, or it will. And tragedy followed. We're going to keep you safe out there. We have a moral and professional obligation to do that, but we're telling the world it's being pushed too far and too fast, and you've got to do more than just determine if it's legal. We have a saying in the flight deck, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's safe or smart, and that's where we are today.
Okay. And of course, we know that their French air traffic controllers at this moment are on strike, disputing air travel there, disrupting air travel there over staff shortages and aging equipment. So another time when you all are back, there's a discussion to be had about whether this is a global problem as well. But we'll have to leave it there. Dennis Tager and Rob Mark, thank you.
Thank you.
And that's our show for this Tuesday night. If you're looking for more context on the complicated issues that matter most to you, sign up for our email newsletter, The Daily Chicagoan. You can do that at WTTW.com/newsletter. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe. Have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that contributes to public safety policy and guidelines.